Husky Game Prep is brought to you by Gate City Bank, proud supporter of your Huskies. Stop by and ask us about our low interest rates to finally buy that new snowmobile or ice house you've been waiting for. Contact any of our 43 locations across North Dakota and central Minnesota, and of course around the St. Cloud area. Gate City Bank, for a better way of life. Member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Hey Huskies fans, welcome back into another episode of Huskies Game Prep, brought to you by Gate City Bank. Sam Getzinger here with you, and it's a postseason edition of the show as we welcome back Mick Hatton. And Mick, you just said it right before I pressed record here. You're running on fumes. You were up at the NCHC postseason tournament. First of all, before we talk about that tournament, tell us how the environment was. Probably the first time you were able to watch a hockey game with a couple of thousand fans in the stands.
Yeah, I mean, in particular, I guess with the championship game, there was a lot of atmosphere, I guess, with it. It was more like not surprising, a North Dakota home game. The fans obviously were big into, cheering for the Fighting Hawks. No surprise there. I mean, it's their home rink, and St. Cloud State did a really good job for a good chunk of, 2 periods for sure of keeping them kind of quiet for the most part. And then, of course, a really bad 5-minute stretch there 5.5-minute stretch there for St. Cloud State ends up costing them. But it was a really good game. I know the score is 5-3, but, they got an empty net goal with 9 seconds left or whatever the heck it was. And St. Cloud State was right there. Honestly, I thought that they outplayed North Dakota for, 50 or 55 minutes in that game. And, to come up short is tough, but, Brent Larson said, you can't replay the 5 minutes, and they learned a tough lesson there. But again, they played really, an interesting tournament. And I think they learned a lot about themselves in that tournament.
Yeah, definitely. You touched on it. The Fighting Hawks come away as the first team ever to win the Penrose Cup and then also win the NCHC Tournament after beating St. Cloud State in the championship this past Tuesday. It was a lot of fun over there at Ralph Engelstad Arena, a neutral site to say the least for this year's postseason play. But looking at St. Cloud State's road to that championship game, they had a tight game against Colorado College, the 7 seed. We saw a lot of high seeds play really good competition all throughout this tournament. St. Cloud State came away with a 2-1 win. Then they came away with a tight win against Minnesota Duluth, and then again a tight loss to North Dakota. What were some of the biggest takeaways for St. Cloud State? What was some of the best things you saw out of their play?
I guess in the first game, we've kind of seen this before in the NCAA tournament. They gave up let's be honest, they gave up a really bad goal to start that game to get down 1-0. Colorado College was playing shorthanded, and, they did what they needed to do. I mean, they clogged up the middle. They kind of slowed St. Cloud State down in the neutral zone. They kind of stacked everybody up on the blue line. And then when they got in their defensive zone, they threw everybody down the middle. And so St. Cloud State was kind of forced outside, and then they had to kind of chip away to finally get to the net. And, the good news there for St. Cloud State was that they stuck with the game plan. They didn't panic. There wasn't suddenly, one guy trying to do everything, or, one guy on a line trying to do everything. They stayed with their team game, and they found a way to win. Against Minnesota Duluth, they gutted one out there. I mean, that was a classic UMD St. Cloud State game that we've seen a ton of here lately, and obviously 7 times this season. Now, the last 2 times they met were kind of wild games because both teams got up to such rip-roaring starts in the first period, and kind of took the other team kind of out of it for a good chunk of those games. But this was much more of a classic St. Cloud State and UMD game, and they got a favorable review, obviously, on Chase Brand's goal, and kudos to their penalty kill in that game, because that played a huge role in that game, and they found a way to win that game. I thought David Rennick was good in the UMD game. I thought he was, honestly, I don't blame David for that loss to North Dakota. he did a terrific job. You know, the first goal that North Dakota scored 2-on-1, you know, they hit a guy on the back door. I mean, there aren't a lot of goalies that make that save against those two guys. You know, and then they came, you know, 2 power play goals in a short amount of time. They kind of, you know, unfortunately, St. Cloud State used their timeout earlier in that game because, you know, after North Dakota scored that second goal, I think, you know, Brett Larson, if he had another timeout, would have taken one there to try to slow that ebb a little bit. But, you know, I think it was good. I mean, it was hard. It was tough, hard-nosed playoff hockey, which is what exactly they're going to see here in the NCAA tournament.
So after watching these 3 games, St. Cloud State putting together a pretty impressive performance, what skaters, you talked about David Rennick, what skaters really stood out to you?
You know, I thought Kevin Fitzgerald had a really good tournament for St. Cloud State. I thought he was, you know, one of the better guys on the faceoff dot. He obviously scored a couple of goals. They're you know, Easton Brodzinski, I know he didn't have points or whatever, but I thought, you know, he did some really key things for St. Cloud State. He was physical. I thought he got back. You know, if you look back at that UMD game, they have the pulled goalie, about 15 seconds left. I think it was Kobe Bender coming down the middle, and Brodzinski tied him up, and he had a lot of net to shoot at if he gets to that puck. And that was a huge defensive play by Brodzinski. And I thought he, you know, overall he was pretty good. You know, I'm trying to think of other guys just off the top of my head that, you know, there wasn't, you know, a bunch of guys that were really bad. I thought their fourth line actually was really good, you know, for most of the tournament. You know, that's Will Hammer, Kyler Kupka, and help me, who's the right wing on that line?
Cockrell, I believe.
Yes, Jared Cockrell.
Yeah.
I thought, you know, especially against North Dakota. North Dakota was banged up, had to play basically 3 lines in that game. And when that fourth line was on the ice for St. Cloud State, they really did a good job of putting a lot of pressure on North Dakota and making them work an awful lot. So I thought that, you know, those guys, again, you know, Kupka had a nice assist in that first game when he got put on the power play because Mietnin went down. And, you know, Cockrell was pretty solid. I thought Will Hammer had a nice tournament. And again, not big numbers.
Right.
I mean, looking for big numbers, but I'm just talking about guys that just played well.
So after the NCHC, you know, tournament is done, a lot of these conferences wrapping up their postseason play. We're starting to see some winners. The Gophers, for example, will be moving on to a regional, as will the Fighting Hawks. What does the future hold for St. Cloud State? You probably have a little bit more knowledge. If so, there's a good chance they're moving on. That's for sure.
Well, I don't think there's any question that they're moving on. They finished second in the NCHC, not only in the regular season but in the postseason. No team that's taken second place in the regular season has ever been kept out of the NCAA tournament. They're in. I mean, it's just a matter of whether or not they're going to be a 2 or a 3 seed in a regional in my mind. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to be the 8 or the 9, you know, in the tournament. Unfortunately, that might be a return to Fargo for those of us who, you know, have seen St. Cloud State play up in Fargo in regionals. That could end up being them up there. Now, the good news is they're not the 1 seed, so they're not. It'll be a much more of a game, I think, where St. Cloud State is going to feel like they're going to have to, you know, just grind something out against whoever it is that they see in the regional. They could also end up out in Loveland. I think those are going to be the 2 places. And again, we don't know hardly anything right now in this season, but those would be my 2 guesses. They're going to be in one of those 2 regionals, and probably a 2 seed, maybe a high 3.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people are thinking. And, of course, the NCAA selection show coming up on the 21st, that will really solidify what happens with St. Cloud State's rest of the season. I'm not going to mention those 2 games that happened in Fargo in the past. We're just not going to talk about it. Hopefully we can have a better future. But I wanted to ask you, Mick, do you think maybe we could see another team out of the NCHC, a Denver potentially after the run they had, or Duluth maybe sneaking in?
Well, I think Duluth is in. I think they finished third in the NCHC in the regular season, and then they make it to the semifinals of the NCHC tournament. I think they're pretty locked into being back in the tournament. I can't envision a scenario where UMD is not in. Now, the fourth team out of the NCHC, that's a little bit more iffy. Now it's either going to be UNO or Denver. Now, David Carl made a strong statement saying that they knocked Omaha out of the tournament by beating them in the opening round of the quarterfinals. And they may have, but I'm not sure that Denver, solidified a spot in the NCAA tournament either. Now they've waived you have to be above 500, rule this season to get in the NCAA tournament. But I no offense to David, and I really like his team, and they gave North Dakota a huge scare. I mean, North Dakota had to pull their goalie and score a pulled goalie goal in the closing minute, and then score 9 minutes into overtime or whatever it was in order to move on. And Denver was playing shorthanded as well because of COVID-19 stuff. So I thought Magnus Corona was terrific in there. Now, if somehow Denver gets into the tournament, they're dangerous. Nebraska Omaha is, to me, they're really on the bubble right now, and they're praying that Mankato wins the WCHA tournament. BC wins out in Hockey East, and then it doesn't really matter in the ECAC and Atlantic Hockey. Those two conferences are only going to get one team in, but in those two tournaments, they have a strong rooting will for the top seed to win the tournament, because they're really sitting in a tough spot right now, I think.
Yeah, and Denver was only a matter of inches from potentially pulling up the upset against North Dakota in regulation after missing that empty net. And then, of course, North Dakota goes on to win in overtime. But we're getting to the point in the season where the rubber's gonna meet the road. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think if Denver had I'll say this, though. If Denver found a way to beat North Dakota, I think they would have been in the tournament. I think that would have solidified their spot, and then I could really make the argument for them in that scenario. But that didn't happen. We saw some wild games, though. In the NCHC tournament, couple overtime games, a lot of 1-goal games. We saw a couple of one game won by a review, one game won in Western Michigan's argument that they lost a game because they didn't get a review on the game-winning goal. So it was a fascinating tournament.
Yeah, you couldn't have scripted it better if you wanted to write a story about it. And the Ralph did a wonderful job. Teams played really well. Only really one blowout, and that was the game between North Dakota and Miami, the 1 versus 8 seed. But the rest of them, they were down to the wire. That was a lot of fun to watch. And we're at a very exciting time of the season. St. Cloud State going to continue on with their postseason play. And we'll know on the 21st where they'll be in the regionals. Mickey said it, potentially a 2 or the 3 seed, maybe in Fargo. We'll maybe see them back over there. But Mick, always a pleasure to have you here on Huskies Game Prep. Be sure to check out therinklive.com for all your college hockey news. And hopefully, Mick, we can do this again here soon.
Hey, anytime you need me, Sam. Always good to talk to you.